India is a country of rich culture. Religion plays an important part in the average Indian's life, in which the majority follows the religion of Hinduism and Islam. However, what one sees today is much different than it was a few hundred years back. After British imperialization of India, aspects of westernization affected the common Indian's life. But within the streets of modern India, what history lies beneath?
Welcome to everyday India under the British in the 20th century. Dirt covering the tattered paths called streets, people are busy in the market and towns trying to make a living. This scene may seem familiar to you as part of the 11 Academy Award-winning film, A Passage to India. A Passage to India focuses on a 1920s middle-aged British woman, Adela Quested, visiting India with the intention of seeing her fiancé. What starts off as a trip to go sightseeing around nearby caves results in Adela's accusation of an innocent native Indian doctor, Aziz, of rape. The accusation of rape brings tension between the natives and the British. It is followed by a controversial court case and reinforces India's desire to be free from the British. But overall, is this movie an accurate depiction of life in India under the British?
A Passage to India was not only an amazing film, but consisted of a multitude of accurate historical information. There are multiple instances in which the judicial systems in India were more in favor of the British than the natives because of the prejudices that existed between the two races. Laws that were passed were often in favor of the British, and natives who did not agree could not say much. An account from a Muslim noble and scholar named Sayyid Khan notes that the natives had no one in the legislative council to incorporate the people's input, and the movie skillfully represents this.
Listen very carefully to the evidence. I find you guilty of cheating under Section 415 of the Indian Penal Code and sentence you to 2 months hard labor. You may take the prisoner down. Well, how did it all go?
We must have seen everything. Yes, church, the hospital, the war memorial, the barracks. Mr. Hadley was most thorough.
Splendid. And now you're off to the club.
This particular scene from the movie is not the main case that occurs, but still provides a clear depiction of the judicial system that existed during this time. The film clearly illustrates the distinctions between the British and the Indians because of the unfairness of the court. Actions similar to what the city magistrate demonstrated, casually asking about Adela and Mrs. Moore's day after punishing a prisoner, reveals the reality of how the British may have ignored the natives and cared little for them. Unsympathetic towards the man receiving the verdict, the judge easily addresses the issue at hand and proves the native guilty, most likely without sufficient evidence. Because the British had the power, they took control and abused their power in the certain circumstances.
Similarly, excerpts from The Benefits of British Rule, written in 1871 by Noroji, address the fact that the British, quote, treated the natives of India not as British subjects in whom representation was a birthright, end quote. Indians had no representation in the government and were often utilized for assistance rather than to take on actual professions. The only factors that could have been incorporated in the film are the benefits of British colonizing India. Stated in the mentioned article, the British brought westernization to India, allowing improvements in technology as well as education. The British brought free speech and more Western ideals to India. The movie represents this well, but also show how the British held influential positions in their governments and limited the representations of Indians.
Personally, we are all delighted that you should be here. But how is England justified in holding India?
Unfair political question.
No. Personally, I'm out here because I need a job. Qualified Indians also need a job. I got in first. And I'm delighted to be here. That's my answer, and that's my only excuse.
And those who are not delighted to be here?
Chuck 'em out. Indians are also saying that.
William Lloyd Garrison Jr. states in his article, British Colonial Rule in India, that he knows that the people of India are virtually debarred from the highest posts in India, except a very small percentage. This article mentions similar topics to what the movie shows. In the movie, only British people held important positions. The Indians played the role of subordinates. Natives were being let go from their jobs, and there were less opportunities for them after the British colonized India. Because the entirety of the government was comprised of the British or their supporters, they were more understanding when providing their own people with jobs. But in both the movie and reality, the colonization of India did not only affect governing bodies, but the day-to-day interactions as well.
And why did you undertake such an extravagance?
To avoid asking them to my house.
Which you had already done.
Now we must all put our shoulders to the wheel. My wife will supply plates, knives, and forks.
And then there is the question of alcohol. Whiskey sodas for Mr. Fielding, ports for the ladies.
And food. The English are big eaters.
And Professor Godbole?
He eats more than the English. And nothing but vegetables, fruits, and rice.
And only if cooked by a Brahmin. And if there is a slice of beef in the vicinity, he will certainly throw up.
The English can eat mutton.
Even ham.
Ham? Are you suggesting I offer ham?
Enough. Now, English ladies cannot sit upon the ground, not even on a Persian carpet.
You must take chairs and tables.
So you will need servants. Then there is also the question of transport after the train journey. The caves are a considerable distance from the station.
I've just been to the station. The train leaves before dawn.
Then you must take precaution against lack of punctuality. Better spend the night there.
The native Indians and the British were so different in nature that the natives would have to compromise their own living conditions to make them more suitable to the British. Because the British were higher up in power, the natives had to respect them and in turn make their own sacrifices to show their respect for the British. When the British came over, it was claimed through the article called British India that certain Indian social or religious practices that the British found to be abhorrent were outlawed. The movie does not show the outlying of social and religious practices. However, it can be inferred that this occurred. In the beginning of the movie, intolerance of Indian way was apparent through the British disgust with the Indians during social parties. The British had attempted to convert the Hindus and Muslims to Christianity by outlawing anything that they deemed strange.
When the British had come into India, India was already economically developed. So with the exception of new technologies, a lot of the benefits went to the tiny British ruling class, and the majority of Indians gained very little, as documented by the National Archives. Little advances in government were made in the eyes of the natives, and forced to make accommodations with oncoming British, it just wasn't a very appealing time for the natives, and that is why many rebelled.
I should look for another job. Hundreds of miles from here, in an Indian state, out of British India. And you?
I shall probably go to England for a long leave.
Will you and she be going back on the same boat?
No. I couldn't possibly get away before the end of next term. Miss Quest is going as soon as she can get a passage.
I see.
Look,
I'm looking.
Godbole tells me that Amitrao is asking 20,000 rupees damages.
And costs.
I'd hate to see her getting the worst of both worlds. It'll ruin her.
And me. Prison. My private letters read out in court. My wife's photograph taken to the police station to be fingered by McBride. All because a young girl fresh from England got too much sun.
I know.
And I know what you're going to ask next. You're going to ask me to let her off paying 20,000 rupees. Right? Then, if I agree, the English will be able to say, here is an Indian that almost behaved like a gentleman. But for the color of his face, we might even let him join the club. Is that why you came here to see me? Answer me. In the end, you English always stick together. I want to have nothing more to do with any of you.
Prejudices, religious, national, social, have paramount influence even in a civilized country. Stated Lord Gardner, unlike the movie, this article is written from the British perspective, giving a contrasting view than that of the film. However, whatever it states in this quote is true. Just 4 ideas described by those 4 words could change a man's way of thinking. Even though Aziz, the native doctor, was proven innocent and not charged for rape, the way the court case had unfolded was not very good for Aziz.
His private possessions had been confiscated, shown in an act of disrespect. The possibility of going to jail for a crime he did not commit was very likely due to the fact of it being a British woman who had claimed to be raped. It was a native Indian's word over a British woman's. Aziz was one of the most respected and noble men in the city, friendly to natives and English alike. Yet having himself be accused of raping a British woman was just another one of these cases where the prejudices occur due to being a different nationality.
According to the article, India under the East India Company, heavy company taxation and other policies had left millions of Bengalis impoverished. While British soldiers and traders made their fortunes, the Indians starved. Although the secondary source talks about heavy taxation in contrast to the film's topic of the British prejudice against Indians, this written source exemplifies the treatment of Indians. Between 1770 and 1773, about 10 million people died of famine in Bengal. 10 million people. That's over 1/3 of their population. Although India's states were not united, they still had an efficient government. Some even say it was as good as the British.
But once the British had colonized India, the government only benefited the British, leaving the millions of natives jobless and hungry. As seen in the film, going from a government where they were for the natives being ruled by the natives to an outside force suddenly coming in and giving them little to no say is a big change. It was no wonder why the natives had rebelled just like they had in the film. This rebellion is similar to the Sepoy Rebellion, due in that it pitted Indians against each other, the British, the ruled against the rulers. This movie is a very amazing and accurate representation of the British treatment of India because it accurately depicts the racial discriminations against the Indians.
It shows a prejudice against the natives. It also portrays the change to the life of an average Indian person.
As seen in the movie, only 20,000 rupees were asked of for Miss Quested. These were definitely not sufficient to cover the damages done to Dr. Aziz. His life was turned inside out and left trampled upon by British officials.
Under those roads that make up present-day India, there are 100 years of history buried underneath. This history, marked by rapid changes in the Indian lifestyle under England, will be a part of India's past forever.